Okay, so welcome everyone to this session of enigmatic, retina cases, and it's a pleasure to be here in the meeting. I have my first presentation, but before that, I want to introduce my other panelists here: the co-chairperson, Dr. Santosh Agarwal, and convener, Dr. Himanshu Deshmukh, and Somil will be a little late,
Yeah.
he said, but he should be joining.
Madam, just wanted to let you know, Dr. Alok Sen is having a family medical emergency, so he has excused himself. And there is one addition, if you have got the older version, one Dr. Mishra is, if he joins, he's going to present a case on CME. So I'll share it on your personal WhatsApp.
Okay, I will have Santosh to announce the speakers and
Sure.
Santosh, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Just Chairman Dr. Subhadra Jalali, Madam, I welcome you, and my co-panelist, convener Himanshu Deshmukh, and Dr. Somil Seth. He is not there. So first talk will be by Dr. Subhadra Jalali, Madam. Everybody knows Madam very well. She is a ROP expert working at LV Prasad Eye Institute, Hyderabad, and she is mentor, guidance. We get guidance every time for ROP cases. We refer her the surgical cases of ROP, and she does the work very well. Thank you, ma'am. And over to you, ma'am, for your talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So today I'm going to, speak on the babies again, neonatal FEBR, and most of these babies I have treated on the day of birth. So that is the highlight of this talk, how to do that. So we all know that FEBR is bilateral, and we see all these different difficult cases with detachment, traction, exudation, phthisis, neovascular glaucoma. But if you consider that the disease is congenital, it always starts in utero on 26, 27, 28 weeks of birth. Once the vasculogenesis is over, the angiogenesis is defective. So, why are we seeing all these advanced cases? Can we do something better? And that is what I'm trying to say. So this is the story of a 3-year-old. You can see at 3 years of age, his one eye is already phthysical, and he's been going around the country with his left eye, this one, and nobody's doing anything. They're just watching. And a simple lens sparing vitrectomy, where we cut that stalk, which is going from the disc up, which is the persistent fetal vasculature stalk, and extensive laser, and this child is cured for life. Notice that child also has little hypoplastic disc. So disc anomalies have been reported. But what I want to highlight is that treatment is vitrectomy. Whenever there is traction, whenever there is exudation, do vitrectomy, they do really well. But 3 years was not good enough. We had to see him earlier because we've already lost one eye. Now here we have two sisters. The top one is one sister, elder one, and after 3 years, the other sister is born, and you can see these phenotypes. So one wonders why the family was not informed in the first state itself that your next child is going to have a problem and needs to be seen. The first sister was seen at 7, the second sister is seen at 2 years. And here we have a newborn baby, 6 weeks old, had leukocoria at birth, referred as retinoblastoma. And what we see is at 6 weeks that one eye already has, a detachment, what we see in Norris disease, dysplastic retina, no tissue seen. The left eye already, the arcades are closed. There's a traction and there's an extensive avascular retina. So this is stage 4B or 3B. And there's no exudation in that eye. So 6 weeks is not good. By 6 weeks, already lost one eye, and the other eye also, a lot of it has lost. So can we go lower? So here we have a term baby who's born, and on the day of birth, I was called to see this baby, born with neovascular glaucoma. You can see enlarged globe, traction, and the other eye already had vitreous hemorrhage. Fortunately, the next day, 2 days of birth, we operated and we could salvage the other eye. But this shows that if we wait for term baby, we may get a situation like this, and we cannot help the child at all. So now 6 weeks is not good, 3 years is not good, 1 day is not good. We have to go down. So here we have a patient, you can see, who presented to us again at 2 weeks of birth, has extensive retinoschisis, hard exudates, and this is before laser. And this patient, we just did only laser. And only laser, you can see all those angry looking vessels have gone. We did laser only to the avascular retina, nothing to these areas, and it has scarred, and patient is sort of quite stable now. So this is the other eye of the same patient. You can see before laser, and this is 1 month after laser. All the hard exudates which were streaming into the fovea, into the arcades, they've all gone away, and the schisis is now flat. So yes, if we do laser very early, then we can just stop all that exudation and folds and all that we see in these patients. So here is a mother who was 16 when she first came to me. She was already one-eyed. And from 16 years till 25 years of age, I have treated her with everything that I had. Anti-VEGF, cryo, prophylactic buccal, laser, again cryo. Nothing worked. She went into no PL. I think I should have done vitrectomy for her. But I had warned her that your child is going to get the same problem. And you can see here, one son, he comes to us at 1 month of birth, already has new vessels, but there's no plus. So this is a milder phenotype. We could treat it. The other child also avascular retina, although there was no new vessels in the second child, but we treated because we knew the story of the mother and we didn't want to have, vitropathy and traction and fold. So what I want to highlight is that in the earlier you see, it is possible to see these children before exudation occurs, before the folds occur, and then just laser will take care of the situation. So what I started doing almost 10 years back was, we have a protocol now that every baby who comes to us, or any blind or any patient who has FEBR and is going to have a child, we tell them that this is the protocol you have to follow. We have to identify that this is FEBR. We counsel the family that there is a blindness to the next child, and they must inform us as soon as they get pregnant, usually by 2 months of the pregnancy. The reason for this is that we want to get a very accurate last menses date. We want to get the dates absolutely correct because, in our country, many women in 4-5 months, they will forget the last menstrual date. Even at 2 months, sometimes they forget. So we want to get the date correct. And then we deliver exactly between 35 to 36 weeks under proper antenatal monitoring of an experienced obstetrician. We tell them to make the, mother gain good weight. All the antenatal monitoring is done. I do the fetal scan for eye development at 18 weeks. With the TIFA scan, we can image the eye, and then again at 30 weeks. The reason for this is that I don't want to deliver a child with an ophthalmia or microphthalmia. So, I want to rule out that there's no other congenital anomaly. Of course, we want to have a normal scan at the time that we are delivering. And always we want to examine the baby on the day of birth or next day. We don't want to wait longer. And, if they're not in my town, I send the same letter to their local retina specialist. I'm thankful to all the retina specialists who have been seeing these babies and then referring them, immediately after birth. So I'm showing you the results of 12 families in last 10 years, and 8 of them followed this protocol and 4 did not. And these 8 compliant newborns, 5 had bilateral FEBR, which needed immediate treatment. And all of them we did laser, but all of them progressed to traction next 4 weeks, and then we had to do lens sparing vitrectomy. So this is one boy. He came to us at 10 years, already one-eyed. I treated his other eye, which is this one. And when I was treating this eye, he had a 2-month-old sibling in the mother's lap. I examined the retina. This is what we found at 2 months: vitreous hemorrhage, traction. We did laser, and very soon we did lens sparing vitrectomy. You can see the hard exudates came up later, but he was okay. And then when the 3rd child was born in this family, I examined on 1 day of birth. This is on the day of birth. Already retinal hemorrhages, early vitreous hemorrhage. We could do the laser, 3 sittings of laser, developed hard exudates at 3 months, did the laser, and now he's fine. No traction, no vitrectomy. Here's another child. This child, one-eyed, has a macular coloboma, has extensive hard exudates, so much of fibrous proliferation. I don't know when he's going to detach, but his brother saw it 1 day of age. Now he's 8 years old, again treated with laser, no traction, no fibrous proliferation. Here is the child. This is the latest one, which I have just treated on 15th of August. The older brother cannot even open his eyes. He's so miserable, blind. His cousin is also blind. This is an FEBR, a large joint family. Day 1 of birth, child was delivered on 15th August. I saw on 16th, total vitreous hemorrhage, very little area seen, 2 sittings of laser. By 20 days, you can see the retina has not grown beyond zone 1. There's also hard exudates, and there's a persistent fetal vasculature causing traction. We added more laser and then did vitrectomy, and now the baby is absolutely okay. So 1 baby developed secondary glaucoma, and that we had to treat. Now, out of those 4 babies who did not come to us on time, 3 of them presented with leukoporia and permanent blindness. So we have a high chance of detecting these babies. 60% of the babies that we saw had very severe disease, and we would salvage all of them, those who came first on time. So I want to conclude by saying that to reduce the blindness due to FEVR, we need to screen within 1 day of birth. We need to deliver them at 36 to 37 weeks, and we need to follow them very closely. We should do the laser immediately, and if they have any traction, go ahead and do the vitrectomy, and then their eyes will be salvaged. Mostly their visual acuity now, after many years that I'm following them, they usually have 20/80 to 20/100 vision because their fovea is not very well developed. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your excellent talk. Ma'am, I have 2-3 questions. One is what is the incidence of FEVR in the newborn?
So
What
we
is the
don't
incidence in India?
So we don't know what is the incidence, but I can tell you out of 20,000 babies that we have screened for ROP in our centers, various babies. In the preterm babies, we found 7 to 8 babies where we could diagnose that this is FEVR, what is now called as Roper, that this is FEVR and not ROP. Because the retina was in zone 2, it remained in zone 2, and the new vessels developed in zone 2, and over 4, 6, 8 weeks, the retinal vessels did not grow. So we know that the tempo, even in a preterm baby, the tempo of disease will tell. So of course the incidence is low, but we have to be careful because of the numbers that we see and because of the consanguinity we have. So always whenever we are in doubt, dilate the parents, dilate the siblings. In 20 to 30% we found positive. Just look at the parent, one of them may be one-eyed, and you know that this is FEVR.
Yes. Ma'am, second is how to differentiate in early months from the ROP. How you will differentiate in early months?
So ROP usually will not have the same tempo. ROP, what you will see, if it is a zone 1 disease, till the ROP starts, the vessels are normal till that edge. Okay, and it will start at 3 or 4 weeks of birth. One. Secondly, the tempo of the disease, the way it progresses, is different in these eyes. You may have no plus in these eyes, or you may have very fulminant plus. Both things are possible. And as I said that, the weight will be better. They may not have had oxygen. And whenever in doubt, if you just watch, you will know that the retina is not getting vascularized. In ROP, always the retinal vessels will grow into the avascular retina. But in FEVR, there's an arrest of vascularization. It will never ever grow. And as I said, examine the parents. See, the protocol that I have put forward does not require us to do genetic testing. Of course, if we had genetic testing, then things would have been little easier, though not always good, because even with genetic testing, only 30-40% we will get positivity. Others will still be negative. It will require us to do amniocentesis, which has its own risks. So that is why the protocol that I have put forth can be followed by any of us. It is very easy to follow, and it doesn't require you to do genotyping, gene testing, and amniocentesis and things like that. So just watch the parent, tell them to deliver 3 to 4 weeks in advance. By that time, usually the children are 2 to 2.5 kg, and they are relatively safe to deliver at 35-36 weeks. So the ROP risk and hyaline membrane disease risk is lower, though not zero. And then we can just go and examine them in the NICU itself within 24 hours of birth. And you will see the finding. The FEVR does not occur in zone 3. So that is very good. It will be either in zone 1 or 2. So it's not that difficult for anybody to see.
And what is the chances of recurrence, madam, after treatment, in spite of good treatment?
So if we have treated at this neonatal age with laser, and if any traction, we've done the vitrectomy, I have not seen any recurrence. But if they come little later, then they can have repeated recurrences. And again, those recurrences we can set off if we do early vitrectomy, rather than, pushing in there. I don't like to give anti-VEGF to these children because already their VEGF is abnormal. There's an automatic arrest of the vascular angiogenesis. Now, if I give anti-VEGF, I'm just adding to the disease burden. So unless there's really fulminant or it's very vascular, where I have to do the dissection, then I might give just 1 day before surgery. Otherwise, no anti-VEGF for FEVR patients.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much. Anybody else have some question? Any question?
So somebody has written a question, can we have unilateral? Yes, sometimes I have seen unilateral, maybe only one case. There also, I would like to do FFA, examine the parents and see that, is there some abnormality in the other eye which is not clinically visible? And sometimes those abnormal loops are visible in the other eye. It can be an asymmetric disease. But I have seen only one patient where I still think it's FEVR, but the other eye is not showing either FFA or clinical change. So I would think if it's unilateral, I would think more in terms of Coats disease or more in terms of persistent fetal vasculature. The other differential diagnosis we have to see, there are many other diseases that can be there. So examine the baby. They can have systemic features of microcephaly, and that is a different disease, DOX6 mutation, or they can have stubby fingers or mental retardation or hearing loss, incontinentia pigmentosa, dyskeratosis congenita, where there'll be history of frequent blood transfusions. So other systemic things also we should look for along with the pediatrician.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am, for your excellent explanation. We will move on to second talk by Dr. Prashant Bawankule on 3D vitrectomy for stage 4 ROP. So Dr. Prashant needs no introduction. He is a renowned vitreoretinal surgeon from Nagpur.
Santosh, everyone knows me now, at least in Maharashtra. And it's so humbling to be talking in front of Dr. Subhadra Jalali. After such an inspiring talk, you have kept my talk. I feel a bit dwarfed, Thank you, madam, for an inspiring talk. And this is just a tribute after having discussed with you on my way back from Bhubaneswar to, we were in Orissa for one of the Orissa state ophthalmic meeting. I had a long discussion when we traveled back, and that inspired me into vitreous surgery for ROP, which I was always trying to hide away from. So this is our short series, which I will present. And this we now do it on a 3D system, 3D digitally assisted system. So, well, friends, everyone knows what is stage 4 ROP, where you have the partial retinal detachment. These are the treatment options, but once the traction increases, it becomes generalized, then the lens sparing vitrectomy is only option. Well, when do you do a scleral buckling in stage 4 is when the traction forces are less than 4 to 5 clock hours, when you have done laser. And there you have a success rate of 60 to 75%, but it is an indirect traction relief. And importantly, you need to ligate the exoplant after 3 to 6 months. And in spite of ligating, you can land up with a myopia of -9, around -9. And that's why lens sparing vitrectomy, which madam and other group has propagated with a success rate in stage 4 as high as more than 60% with a good visual outcome, is a procedure of choice. Well, anti-VEGFs definitely reduces the vascularity, gives you an advantage. Well, the dose has to be the half dose. This study shows that it should be given earlier than 7 days to avoid crunch phenomenon, but most of the times we inject a day or two ahead of the vitreous surgery. Otherwise, it leads to traction, more increased traction. Whether vitrectomy is easier in an eye versus post laser, yes, of course, these various studies have shown that laser or beta anti-VEGF increases the anatomical as well as the functional success rate of a vitreous surgery in stage 4. Try to spare the lens, but in exceptional circumstances when you have significant anterior traction, peripheral traction more than 6 hours, or the retina is sticking, that is retrolental membrane, that is the only stage when you need to sacrifice the lens. Well, we started with microscope. Now we have been using since last 3 years digitally assisted surgery, and we are convinced with the use of it because it provides a magnification along with depth and field of view, which is unparalleled and uncomparable to microscope. So some of the cases where I would show this magnification at which we can operate a ROP case, which was not imaginable in a routine microscope. Well, usually field of view and depth goes inversely with the magnification, but look at this particular video which shows the field of view. In such complicated cases where you have multiple membranes having multiple attachments at different places, such an enlarged field of view gives you a definite better understanding of the pathoanatomy of the disease and thereby leading you to a more definitive surgical results. Now look at this depth. At this phenomenal magnification, you will see this is a membrane and this anterior loop. Can you imagine the depth which you are seeing? The retina appears to be deeper, and this is the loop which we are dissecting. So confident we are at my level of such minimal experience with ROP. It really boosts your confidence to do. Well, bleed is the only time when the digitally assisted system becomes sometimes occurs. Well, if you use a filters like this, it dwarfs down or it tones down the red color and facilitates the surgery with the help of it. And all this you have to do at 1/10 of a illumination, and 1/10 of the illumination in prolonged surgeries like ROP definitely means less chances of phototoxicity. So coming to the aim of surgery, these are the various ridges, traction points, that is reach to ora, reach to lens, reach to ridge, and optic nerve to this. These are the points which have to be ligated. Unlike other conventional vitrectomy where we do core vitrectomy, PVD, that is not needed. You just need to ligate or cut this traction points, and that is the end of the surgery. Now, this is a video under 3D system where you can see at a high magnification where I'm cutting reach to ora. Here I'm just peeling the membrane, and then with the help of a vitreous cutter, you can just trim off the reach to ora connection. Well, reach to lens, you can see at such a high magnification, again, this particular loop was almost behind the lens. Now we have trimmed it with the help of a vitreous cutter, and then I'm cutting the anterior loop. And this is ridge to ridge, where in between the ridge, there are membranes which need to be dissected either by bimanual technique or with a vitreous cutter. Initially, we attempt only with the help of a vitreous cutter, and then it can be done. And this is disc to ridge, where I'm peeling off the membranes. There are multiple levels of membrane which need to be peeled to relieve these traction folds which exist with this type of a fold which exists. Well, this is another video which shows at a high magnification the membrane peeling being done. This is just a relatively easy case where you have a residual fold and this traction which needs to be cut, and then you peel off the membrane over the ridge, and that's the end of the surgery. This is a case of a retrolental membrane where you have to sacrifice the lens to have an access to the membrane which was just behind the lens. And after doing a lensectomy, you can visualize the membrane which then was dissected with the help of a vitreous cutter, and by bimanual technique we did the surgery. Then we moved behind. This is just behind the lens, and at the end, after under microscope, I'm depressing and going to the periphery and dissecting as much as membrane possible in the post periphery. And look at the magnification at which I'm operating. It's unimaginable with a microscope. So this is another case where you have an anterior loop with a traction disc drag where you are dissecting the membranes on the disc, and this is how I'm relieving the traction membranes from the residual fold over there, and then doing the peel. This PGI group has proposed that nasal bridge of the kits are smaller, and so you can sit on the nasal side, especially for very advanced traction and temporal peripheral. Well, we attempt and we do find it quite comfortable even with a 3D visualizing system to sit on the nasal side and take care of a 180-degree away traction. So this is another one of the complete videos which will show you various steps of a vitrectomy which is being done in a stage 4. First we do vitrectomy, then cut the ridge to ridge connections. The well vascularity was there in spite of the laser. It bleeds. You might use minimal cautery to get a thing. This is small. I'm doing segmentation of the membranes slowly one by one and cutting off all the attachments anteriorly to the ridge, to the disc. And you can see near completion, you have relieved most of the traction, and then you do simple fluid air exchange, and that's the end of the surgery. And this is the last stage in last video in our video bouquet, where you can see again, such a vascular traction points over here, they really bleed. And you have to be very careful because a single break in such cases spells doom for the poor patient. And so you have to be very careful, very slow. And the beauty of this surgery in a digital system is the magnification which you can appreciate in each of this video and the depth which it is giving. And in such complicated system surgeries, definitely I feel it is more advantageous to use a 3D system and be comfortable. So to summarize, vitreous surgery is definitive surgery in stage 4 ROP. Pre-op lasers and anti-VEGFs definitely increase the post-operative success rate. The goal is to relieve all 4 tractions, unlike other vascular retinopathy surgeries. And 3D digital surgery eases the complex procedure by allowing unique combination of a magnification with extended depth and field of vision. So these are few of the pre-op photographs and the post-op photographs of some happy patients. Thanks a lot for everything. And thank you, Subhadra Madam. This is just a small tribute from my side towards big efforts which you do for all the babies. And I'm humbled to share in front of you this all my small effort.
I think you have taken big steps. So
Yeah, that was our transit between Bhubaneswar to which place was that, ma'am? 2 hours. It really inspired me. Then I started. Yes, Cuttack to Bhubaneswar.
Okay, any questions we have for Prashant?
Ma'am, just one question from my side. Ma'am, what is the field of view, Prashant?
Yes,
Because if magnification is more, your field will be less. So
exactly.
is it difficult for you to operate in such less field?
No, that's what I said. This system, usually, if you go by the physics, field of view and depth is inversely proportional to the magnification. While with this system, the magnification is 40% more than the highest magnification which the microscope offers. And you have an extended depth of field, which is 1.6 times more than the routine microscope, as well as field of view, which is more than that of a microscope, in spite of magnification. That is the beauty of this system. And that's why you could see that when I'm operating in a periphery, you could see such a big ora serrata and all. It really
Any
makes your life
disadvantage?
easier. Yeah.
Any disadvantage?
See, the only disadvantage is when there is a bleed in a digital image, the red color enhances and it really it means glares at your eye. So you have to use a proper filter. If you use a red free filter, you tone down the red color and you manage. So for us, it's more than 12 babies and almost 20 eyes, which I have done in last 2 years. And I'm extremely convinced that it is better than microscope to operate such complicated cases.
Okay. Thank you, Prashant, for your excellent talk. Beautiful talk. Our next speaker is Dr. BP Kashyap. I think he is not there. Dr. Alok Sen, how to recognize ocular syphilis. Dr. Alok Sen, please.
I think he was not going to be able to make it. There was some family medical emergency. That's what somebody mentioned earlier.
Okay, then Dr. Saurabh Luthra, sir.
Yes.
Leopard can't change his spots, ocular lymphoma.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Santosh. I thank MOS for this opportunity. I'll be sharing my screen on this interesting case, which we have been managing for the past 10 months or so. So are my slides visible?
Sorry. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this was a 57-year-old female, first presented to us 16 years ago with decreased vision, both eyes, was diagnosed with vitritis, left eye had a dense cataract, was managed with topical steroids. Systemic investigations at this time were largely non-contributory. Subsequently, she had disc edema and was diagnosed as left eye optic neuritis, managed with IVMP, which resolved a month later. This is all about 11 years back. The saga continues. 2 more episodes of bilateral low-grade vitritis in the following year. Uveitis panel again at this time was non-contributory. She subsequently was 6/9 OU after left eye cataract surgery. She was lost to follow-up for a period of 7 years. She presented again in January this year with a vision of counting finger close to face in the right eye and 6/18 in the left eye. There were vitreous cells in both eyes. Right eye showed advanced glaucomatous cupping. The media was grade 3. Left eye media was grade 1, and there were multiple pigmentary changes and intraretinal hemorrhages along the arcades. So this is the pre-treatment ultra-wide field color fundus photo where you can see that the right eye media is very hazy, and in the left eye you are seeing these pigmentary alterations with hemorrhages. Pre-treatment swept source OCT was done. Right eye showed sub-RP hyperreflective deposits with associated neurosensory detachment, and left eye showed a uniform band-shaped sub-RP hyperreflective deposit. The Brooks membrane appeared intact with both eyes. So this is the swept source OCT pre-treatment, where you can see in the right eye these deposits, and in the left eye you can see this hyperreflective band. The fundus autofluorescence showed in the right eye the media was hazy, but in the left eye there was a granular pattern of hyper with hypoautofluorescence, like a leopard spot appearance. So this is what we saw on the fundus autofluorescence. And this is an ultra wide field fundus autofluorescence showing leopard spot appearance in the left eye. Fundus fluorescein angiogram showed in the right eye there was peripapillary leakage, whereas left eye showed punctate hyperfluorescent defects with characteristic hypofluorescent lesions. Again, a leopard spot kind of appearance in the left eye on FFA. The systemic investigations at this point of time were non-contributory. CSF did not show any atypical cells, no morphological evidence of lymphoma. A PET scan was done which showed no abnormal hypermetabolic focus or mass lesion. EBUS was done for the mediastinal lymph nodes, which did not show any evidence of metastatic carcinoma, and immunohistochemistry did not show any evidence of lymphoproliferative disease. A diagnostic vitrectomy in the left eye was done at this point of time, and which actually showed positive cells for lymphoma, and where the T cell markers CD3 and 4 were positive, while B cell markers were negative. This is these are the cytology smears showing numerous atypical lymphoid cells, and CD3 was positive. So this is courtesy of RP Center, where Dr. Seema Kashyap has done this. And we took the help of Dr. Rohan Chawla at RP Center AIIMS for this. So a diagnosis of bilateral primary vitreoretinal lymphoma was made of T cell origin. She was started on a regimen of bilateral intravitreal methotrexate injections. A total of 25 injections is the course with the induction, consolidation, and maintenance phase. So far, she has received 20 injections. Adverse effects of corneal epitheliopathy and transient IOP rise have been seen, but which were managed with mild topical steroids and anti-glaucoma medications. In June, the vision improved to 660 right eye, 624 left eye. Repeat FFA and SD OCT showed resolution, and thus she appeared to be in remission. This is what the OCT looked like in June this year. And this is the FFA. In September, again, she had a recurrence of subretinal fluid in the right eye. She underwent a right eye vitreous biopsy. However, this time the immunohistochemical markers for both T cell and B cell were non-contributory. A repeat PET CT scan was non-contributory. Post vitreous biopsy in the OD, the subretinal fluid had resolved. So this is the latest picture. This is just very recent. Right eye is 1/60 and left eye is 636 parts. And you can see the leopard spot appearance still present in the left eye, although there is no subretinal fluid at this point of time in both eyes. So she has recently received, just a week back, the 20th intravitreal methotrexate injection in both eyes. So primary intraocular lymphomas can be primary or secondary. 60 to 90% of primary vitreoretinal lymphomas involve the brain, and 15 to 20% of patients with primary CNS lymphoma will develop a primary vitreoretinal lymphoma later. More than 95% of primary vitreoretinal lymphoma are the large B cell type, whereas only less than 5% are of T cell origin. And these are the various clinical features to look for. Gold standard is histopath examination via a transpars planar vitrectomy with 25 or 27 gauge. The specimen is obtained with a low vitrector cut rate. The diagnosis is very challenging because of the analysis has to be done within a very short period of time. And recently, this MYD88L265P in the aqueous tap has been shown to be positive for lymphoma. These are some of the cytology findings in lymphoma. And in the treatment of lymphoma, if it is ocular involvement only, treatment depends as whether one eye or both eyes. If unilateral, then local therapy in the form of external beam radiation therapy can be given. For bilateral eye involvement, there is no uniformly accepted regimen. Intravitreal methotrexate and or rituximab, to a combination of systemic chemo and radio to both eyes and brain, to a combination of systemic chemotherapy and intravitreal methotrexate has been used. Bilateral radiation is not favored. No consensus about treating isolated primary vitreoretinal lymphoma with systemic chemotherapy for preventing CNS relapse. Our patient presently. So this is just a summary of the treatment regimens which are there for lymphoma. So we can have various findings on OCT, and you can see that there can be a discrete pre-RP nodules to subretinal infiltrate, to a mixed intraretinal and subretinal infiltration, to irregular indistinct RPE, as you see in the D figure here, to E, you can see a diffuse hyperreflective foci in the posterior vitreous, and in the F picture, you see a subretinal infiltrate as a confluent band, as was seen in the left eye in our case. So what is the take your practice message? The diagnosis of primary vitreoretinal lymphoma is challenging, as presenting features are non-specific, often masquerading as chronic uveitis or vitritis. Diagnosis is often delayed due to lympholytic effect of steroid therapy. Looking for imaging biomarkers on OCT, such as hyperreflective subretinal infiltrates, sub-RP deposits, RP undulation, and clumps of vitreous cells, and the finding of leopard spot on fundus fluorescein angiography and fundus autofluorescence help clinching the diagnosis. Thank you. And the patient still continues to be on follow-up.
Very nice.
Thank you, ma'am.
So anybody has any question for Saurabh? So Saurabh, do you have any explanation why there was a lull period of many years? Like, do you think that was a different disease and this is different disease, or you think it was the same condition which?
Ma'am, I think that's the most, good question. And that's the most puzzling thing for us also. But we don't really think that the primary episodes of vitritis almost 11 years back and, another 2 episodes of vitritis and 1 episode of optic neuritis were, because at that time also we did put the patient through a lot of imaging, even systemic evaluation, but we could not, get to the diagnosis of a lymphoma. And the fact that the patient has gone on to live for another 11 years, I mean, it again goes against a primary diagnosis of lymphoma at that point of time, because usually these patients do develop systemic manifestations within a few years of diagnosis of PVRL.
So it is known that if we give immunosuppressive therapies for
Yes.
any disease, they are prone to develop cancers later in life. So do you think it's like, she was on immunosuppression actually for a non-lymphoma condition, and then that somehow precipitated the onset of lymphoma after many years?
Ma'am, she wasn't on any immunosuppressive therapy for systemic conditions. And as far as the vitritis episodes were concerned, they were mostly managed with topical steroids and at the most a very short course of systemic steroids. So she did not at any point of time receive any immunosuppressive therapy for the eye condition or the, systemic condition. There was no history, ma'am.
And is there family history of cancers, or anybody else in the family had any malignancy in the past?
No, ma'am. So that again is not forthcoming, and there was no clear-cut history of any systemic malignancy in the family, ma'am. It wasn't elicited, ma'am. So we couldn't elicit a history.
Any other questions?
Saurabh, beautiful case. Thank you, and very nice summing up of things about lymphoma. But the right eye, did that patient have a peripapillary CNV by any chance?
So that's again a thing which was puzzling us, and in fact we did the OCTA also through that area, could not demonstrate any vascularity. So it appeared more like a like a Schrem kind of thing, but it was not vascularized. So in the angio there was some leakage, but we also did OCTA and especially concentrated on that peripapillary area of subretinal hyperreflective material, but could not really demonstrate any vascularity. And the fact that she did not worsen with the methotrexate, and we never gave her any anti-VEGF, also again goes to show that it's unlikely that that area is a CNVM.
Methotrexate also will have had some anti-inflammatory effect, which could have suppressed CNVM if it was there.
I agree, sir. So, I mean, but still the main thing was that on OCTA, we did not see any vascular pattern within that, it was not like a vascularized Schrem. It was just, a hyperreflective material with no vascular, flow signals within it.
Any role of steroids in such cases?
So that's a good question. And what I've pointed out that if we had given steroids, it would have, led to remission temporarily. And often that is the reason that, before biopsy, if the patient has received steroid, we will miss the diagnosis altogether. So because of the lympholytic effect of steroids. So before taking these patients up for biopsy diagnostic vitrectomy, we have to discontinue steroids for some time so that we can have a high yield of lymphoma cells.
Okay. So I tried to check in the literature how many days we have to stop the steroids, but I could not get that answer. So I stopped for at least 3 weeks.
Yes, ma'am.
So, but it doesn't say, it just says stop, but for how long it doesn't tell us.
That's not very clear.
So if we have given subtenon or something, then it is difficult. But if you have given topical, then I think 2 or 3 weeks minimum.
Yes.
And then as Saurabh said, no, the sample has to be sent to the lab immediately. So the lab should know that you are doing this case, because many times the biopsies we do in the evening. So this should be done early enough for the lab person to come and collect it and plate it and centrifuge it immediately, and keep some of it for the immunohistochemistry, immunocytochemistry.
Yes, ma'am. And that's why we took the help of RP Center, because we couldn't have done it here in a smaller city like ours. So we took Rohan Chawla's help, and through their histopath department, I mean, we could manage to clinch the diagnosis.
So thank you, Saurabh sir. I think Ragini madam is there. Please unmute, ma'am. Do you want to say something?
No, I just came to say hello to Subhadra ma'am and congratulations to you. Hi
Thank
to
you.
Prashant, hi to Saurabh bhaiya, hi to Paritosh bhai, and just to be there.
Thank you,
So
ma'am.
happy that all of you are there, and salute to Subhadra ma'am. And congrats Santosh, this time you did it.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you because of you only.
Nahi, you sat down so many times for other people. This time you deserved the post because तुमने 2-3 साल लहाने सर का सुन के बैठ गया. This time I think the people voted for you.
Yeah, thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Prashant was flying to Nagpur today morning and he, Saurabh bhaiya, hi, good to see you.
Evening, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Nice to
Paritosh
see you.
bhai, hi, sorry, hi Sharad Boman sir. Sorry to interrupt your session, ma'am. Lovely to see you. Sorry to interrupt your session.
Okay, we'll go ahead with the
Not at all,
session now.
not. Yeah.
Thank you, Ragini. Okay, Santosh, we can ask the
Yeah,
next speaker.
Yeah, myself only. Myself, I am
Okay.
going to speak on.
I will do the privilege of introducing Santosh Agrawal, who has done a
Arre.
vitreoretinal fellowship from Shankar Netralaya, practicing in Aurangabad, and now yesterday got elected as president-elect for Maharashtra Ophthalmological Society. So over to you, Santosh.
Thank you, Prashant. He is my good friend. That's why he's telling so many nice things about me. Thank you. So my topic is tele-ROP screening and management, an ideal model. So as you know, retinopathy of prematurity is a disease affecting the retina of premature infants. It is characterized by immature, incompletely vascularized retina. And contemporary neonatology practices in the premature infants have increased the survival rate, which have escalated the risk of developing ROP. And it is the leading cause of preventable infant blindness in the world. Today's scenario, the incidence is in India, 5 million babies born premature every year. The incidence of ROP is around 40 to 50%. It is greater in rural and remote areas. Annual live births in India is around 26 million, and ROP screening required is about 5 million. It is very large, and merely 100 and 150 ROP experts are there in India. So we need to look at all those problems. Again, the referral rate to the ophthalmologist is very low from the pediatrician side. 58% pediatricians refers, 8% pediatricians refers only sometimes, and 34% pediatricians never refer. So, and also there is a non-availability of ROP expert ophthalmologist. That is the problem in the present scenario. Also, the apathy on the part of pediatricians and ophthalmologists. Apart from that, the patients are also ill-informed. They have some financial constraints, and they are not aware of this disease. Now, the BIO is the gold standard. That is a binocular indirect ophthalmoscope, by which we traditionally look into the retina of premature babies and diagnose the ROP condition. That is a gold standard, but it has limitations. It is very difficult to perform. Many times you skip the areas of fundus periphery. You have to see the periphery 360 degree, and many times you can't see because of the uncooperative nature of the children or infants. It is time consuming. You have to go to the NICU. You have to spare time for that. You have to draw the diagram, and it is subjective phenomena. So documentation is also poor. So now comes the wide angle or wide field imaging for ROP screening. That is the evolution that happened recently, and by a trained or accredited optometrist or ophthalmic assistant can do that. And it was developed and validated by KID ROP organization led by Dr. Anand Vinekar. And also Australian has also validated this type of screening, and government of India also accepted, and now they wanted it in all states. So in India, Forus Neo camera by Bangalore-based company, that is Trinetra, has come out with the camera. It is wide field, portable, and it is very low cost and novel. As against RedCam, though RedCam is the gold standard or it is the best camera, but it is very expensive. As against that, the Forus Neo camera is compact, portable, and it has low cost. Another advantages are it is accessible to rural areas. The mass screening is possible. In our model, our optometrists perform the screening in 3 minutes only. So tele-ROP is possible with this method, and it is an objective method. It is a reproducible method, and documentation is very well possible with this method. So this is the indirect ophthalmoscopic method. Now, left side is the RedCam, right side is the Forus Neo camera, which is very compact, and we can take it to the remote places. Now, what is our model? We have come out with a Arambha ROP screening project in a private. It's a private project. It is a partnership project. It is a joint venture, and we adopted the team approach. That is 2 vitreoretinal surgeons and 1 pediatric ophthalmologist in our area. We have come together and we form ROP screening project. We got inspired by Dr. Anand Vinikar, Dr. Jalali Madam, Dr. Sucheta Kulkarni. We ourselves first refined our knowledge. We made different neonatologists. We visited NICUs, and we took a lot of efforts initially. We have also hired optometrists who got trained at higher centers. We maintained good communication. We maintained good coordination between patient, neonatologist, and ROP expert. In one day, we followed one route, one city, and around 30 to 40 babies are screened in a day. We treat the babies at tertiary center, our own center, or in the NICUs. So this is the brochure which is given to the neonatologist or the ophthalmologist. This is our team. This is the examination record we keep on hard paper also. This is the leaflet given to the patient for awareness in NICUs. This is the poster we paste in the neonatologist or pediatrician's clinic. Now this is the Forus Neo camera, very compact. We can take it to anywhere. We can mobilize it in a rickshaw also, in car, bus. So this is the screening is done in the NICU. It's just like a sonography probe, very easy to use. And the optometrists bring the images to us in our own clinic. We don't have to go or visit the NICUs. We just interpret the reports. And not only fundus, but also intersegment photos we can take, and we can rule out congenital anomalies, congenital cataract, glaucoma, etc. And apart from ROP, we can diagnose different congenital problems like coloboma, RD, retinoblastoma, and also we can rule out albinotic fundus. So this is the ROP case. This is before treatment. You can see stage 4. There is a fibrovascular proliferation is seen in the periphery. We have lasered it and it got quite, and we referred it for second opinion to Dr. Subhadra Jalali Madam. I want her opinion whether surgery is required in mandatory in such cases. This is a foray again, second case. We did laser. It got quietened, but still we want to take second opinion. We referred it to Dr. Madam. This is another case of APROP. We given the injection, intravit injection, and it got resolved. This is another case again, APR. With the injections. This is again the case with the RIDGE stage 3 ROP in zone 2, zone 3. We did laser. So our screening place was in the NICU or our own center. It is a unique ROP screening model. Narayan Netralaya has conducting the same type of model. HV Desai is also conducting. And we are the unique in running this project as a joint venture in private, covering about 8 districts and 3 civil hospitals and 2 medical colleges. This is our data. Up till now, we have screened around 5,559 cases, and ROP were 12.35%, and treatment was given in 3.52% cases. So this is our data. What are the problems with our model? We need skilled assistant. There is a lot of traveling. There is many times image quality may not get proper. And there is an apathy on the part of pediatrician, but we have to train him. We have to make him aware about the severity of the problem. And some patients many times refrain from repeated follow. There is some resolution problem in the periphery, and the illumination problems are there. Now company is going to sort out those problems. So this is the unique model which can be adopted in India, especially in private sector, to curb the incidence of ROP and huge burden of childhood blindness. It is a low-cost indigenous camera, tele-ROP screening, and team approach of experts can make it successful. Documentation helps in counseling and data collection, and also in medical legal issues. So it is the ideal model. I wish it should be adopted by many others in India. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much, all panelists, for patient listening.
Thank you, Santosh and team, for that excellent presentation. So anybody has any questions before I give my comments? Any questions to Santosh? Yeah, you can unshare, Santosh. Yeah. Anybody has questions? So excellent work, Santosh. I just wanted to say a couple of things. One, don't put indirect ophthalmoscopy as the old way. You know, the photography, the telecamera, the indirect ophthalmoscopy, they're all complementary to each other. There are some things which we see better on cameras. There are some things we see better on indirect. So don't discard old white-haired people. They are still, useful. So I would say that, you just say that this was one way we were doing, and now we have an additional way of doing. And depending on the situation, you can use one, both together, one after the other. And then there are many other cameras also which are now available. So about the awareness, that's what I wanted to highlight. So recently we had triplets who were delivered in a remote part of Andhra Pradesh. And that man, very smart, he has gone on the net to find out about premature babies. And then he has seen my video talking about ROP, and he has asked his pediatrician, should my babies get ROP screening? And the pediatrician said, no, it's very rare, and I don't think your babies are going to get that. So I don't think it's that important. But the father himself traveled with all his 3 1 kg babies to our center, and by the time he came, 2 of them had stage 4A tractional detachment, 1 had very advanced AP-ROP. Fortunately, we were able to salvage all those 3, and that story is coming out. But what I want to highlight is that all of us should work equally on awareness as we work on our work, because this is a public health problem. We have to go step by step. We don't have to offend anybody or do anything. But whenever I get any baby with stage 4 or 5, I send the NNF guidelines to that sir who has not referred, and I also give posters, and I send on WhatsApp the posters that please help your patients. And the parents not coming on time, again, very important. When they are in the waiting area, when your technician goes, then he should roll out a standee which is showing the different stages and how the children will become blind, and especially photos with blood. If you show photos with blood, then the parents can understand blood. Otherwise, they think that you are seeing something and this is some research work and you just want to earn money. So they have all sorts of doubts. And involving the local collectors, local people, keep on pushing on the awareness. Now World Prematurity Day is coming on November 17th. Everybody should put out posters, radio talks, small things in your newspaper. So push it. The more we do, the public will ask for it, and the doctors will also be aware.
Surely, ma'am.
We all should take that part. Is very, very good, and especially in local languages. And the more we are also shifting to a lot of technicians or fellows, optometrists doing, there is some resistance from doctors the pediatricians, they want, the faculty will need to come, especially for the very tiny babies, especially for very delicate babies whom they have saved, or VIP babies. So we do accept that request. But yeah, we are also taking help of technicians and other fellows. And now more and more general ophthalmologists, we are having general ophthalmologists now who are taking up the camera and doing the screening. So that is also helping.
One question, ma'am. I have shown 2 cases of 4A, that elevated retina in the periphery. I did laser, but I was not convinced.
Yes.
How much laser we should do, and when to refer, or when we should intervene surgically?
So I think that's a very, very important question. I keep on telling this to all people who refer to us, that the first step is that whenever you are treating, whether with anti-VEGF or laser, please get hemogram done on that day or next day. The disease will progress and your treatment will not work if the baby is anemic. We have seen this repeatedly. Or if the baby still has lung problem. So telling the parents to keep the nose clean, use NasoClear nasal drops, do chest physiotherapy, do nebulization, whatever, in consultation with their doctor, and see that the hemoglobin is at least 10 and the RBC count is normal. If not, they should give the transfusion. That is one step, very, very important, whether you are referring for surgery or you're doing treatment yourself. The second thing is, if there's a persistent fetal vasculature stock, if there is a stock which is going from the disc to the periphery, these eyes will worsen more than when there is no stock. So that is one group which you must see carefully. And the moment you see that, that fetal stock is there and it is going towards the ridge, those patients have to be referred early. Now, if the traction or the elevation is more than 3 clock hours, those are the patients who will worsen, more. And of course, if the plus has not gone, then they will worsen. So if there is an early traction and still the retina is attached, and you can laser behind the ridge. So laser anterior to the ridge, laser behind the ridge, see again in a week, do some add laser, and then follow every week. And the moment you see, and then, examine all around. Many times people examine only the temporal side, examine inferior, examine superior, look at the persistent fetal vasculature front. And if you think that the traction is now more than 3 clock hours, then please refer immediately after giving the transfusion. So these are some of the, clues.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you.
I had a couple of questions, ma'am. In cases where the vasculature has not developed and the baby is like 3 months plus and baby is bigger, and it's difficult to examine these babies, just by holding them, and we don't have a ret cam. So what is the way around this? If, if there's a delayed maturity in these babies, so how can we, kind of examine these babies once they reach that particular size where it's difficult to restrain them? And the other question is that medico-legally, if patients don't follow up on the time that they're told, how do we, kind of, apart from documenting that they were called for a visit and they didn't come, what else can we do to avoid, medico-legal issues in these cases?
So one thing is, of course, that your notes should be very meticulous. When you're sending them off, don't say come in 2 weeks. Write come on 30th of June 2014 and write JUNE. Because one patient I wrote 767/6/2021, he came on 6 July. And when I asked him, I said, I have written 7 June, but you have come on 6 July. He told me, I live in Dubai and there they use the USA system. So then I learned that, okay, it is my mistake. I should have been more conscious. So now I always write JUNE, so we all learn. So write the exact date when they have to come, where they have to come. So that should be very careful. And your findings, your findings have to be there. So, last time the litigation happened in Delhi, it was because the doctor has done ROP screening and he has written ROP screening done, no ROP come in 2 weeks. The court did not accept that. They said, where is it is written that you have done dilated examination of the fundus? Where is it is written that you have, because we don't enter dilated drops. No, we don't enter what time sister put the drops. So at least in the notes, we have to write ROP screening done by so-and-so. Pupil was dilated, media was clear, retinal vessels are in zone 2, the vascular pattern is normal, there is no looping, there is no hemorrhage, so there is no ROP, and now the patient has been called back on 6th June and the parents have been informed. So once you've done all that, you are free. You have already told them, you have also made a phone call, you've seen that they didn't come. After that, it's not your business, okay? And you already informed the treating pediatrician that this patient I was following. If you can convince them to come, it will be good. So I think our notes are very important, and of course the conveying to the parents, giving them that brochure when they come first, giving them access to the YouTubes. There's so many YouTubes now available. So giving them those informations, both by the NICU pediatrician and by us. And beyond that, we can't do anything. But our notes, they are complete, then we are safe.
I can add, ma'am, one thing. What we do additionally is that we have a follow-up sheet, and on follow-up sheet we have 2 copies. One is with us, one with them. So the copy which they carry have my signature, and the copy which we retain for us have their signature at every visit, which clearly mentions the follow-up date.
Yeah. So like an immunization card, many people, we are giving that vaccination card, then they also remember, because what happens here is she was in the Sasural, now she went to Mackay. Here the husband was in charge, there in Mackay, brother is in charge. We have all these problems. So if the card is there, that also helps, because it will show the serial thing, and then the mother can read the date, even if she can't read other things. At least she can read the date, even if she's illiterate.
Thank you, ma'am.
We also remind the patients, ma'am.
And that other question, Saurabh, which you had about the follow-up.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
so previously I was doing no monotherapy. I was doing combined therapy for this reason. But more and more, I'm doing only monotherapy. That is because I use only Avastin, where the recurrence rate is very low, less than 10%. Especially if we have taken care of the systemic issues, which I talked about, then the recurrence rate is very low. And second thing is, even if the recurrence comes, it will come little later. So if you are using non-Avastin drugs, then 40%, that means every third or fourth baby will have a recurrence, and it will occur very early. So you have to follow very closely. So one is what drug you are using. Second is what is the health of the baby, gaining weight, not gaining weight, anemia, lung problems, still on oxygen, sepsis, pneumonia episode. So those things matter. And fourth is when they become big, fat. If I'm not very comfortable, I always take them under anesthesia. At least one time I will examine under anesthesia to know what is happening. I may not do laser. Previously, I was doing laser. Now, if there's a peripheral avascular retina and the vessels have shown up, have shown growth. So what has happened, growth, then I'm comfortable. I think Tapas has collected some data, and he has shown that those patients who have slower vascular growth, they may have more recurrence than those who have, a more relatively a little more better growth. But that data we have to analyze. But yeah, I think as you follow for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, you get an idea what is the tempo of disease. They can still recur, but I think they recur because we have sort of missed that something was smoldering there. But if it is completely gone and the circumferential vessel has formed, and now the vascular network is started to branch and show normality, then I think the recurrence will be less. But we all are learning. Please keep up your learning. See your cases properly. See Tapas' article. See, he spent 3 years drawing every vessel. And when we went back to those vessels, what he had drawn, what was happening, we learned so much. So this is a new therapy. I think the more we see, the more we do, we will learn. And we are all, excellent clinicians. We will get that, skill of knowing which babies we have to laser, which babies we can follow, what is happening to that retina. But yeah, bigger babies, whenever you're in doubt, even post laser, they can get recurrence. Whenever in doubt, please don't hesitate to see them under anesthesia.
Thank you, ma'am.
I have picked up new vessels under anesthesia where I had thought that everything is okay. Even I had lasered a baby under GA, and then, she lost one eye in spite of my doing that. I thought I have done a good job. Fellow is not done. Under GA I did, still she lost one eye. So, so I think sometimes they may be having some underlying FEVR or whatever. So whenever in doubt, just do an EUA. We can all do that.
Thank you.
Okay, I have to leave. Thank you so much for having one more session. Bye. We've completed
Thank you,
the session,
everybody,
right?
for your excellent talk and
Inspiring.
nice discussion. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Prashant. Thank you, Saurabh, sir. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Swapnesh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And sir, congratulations once again for
Thank
winning
you,
the
thank you,
election.
Swapnesh. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Swapnesh.
Shubhadra
Thank you.
madam. Thank you, Saurabh sir. Thank you, Prashant sir. Prashant sir, we have kept him busy all day since morning. Saurabh sir also since morning we have kept him busy. Thank you so much, Agarwal sir, Shubhadra madam. So that's the end of the retina session, and we are coming to the end of a MOS VIRCON 2021, a successful conference. Last thought by Agarwal sir.
You are the key person, I think, for the whole conference.
Great show.
Thank you
I
very
should
much.
say Great show, everyone.
job.
The scientific committee really,
Thank you.
Ragini madam, Swapnesh, and what's his name? Sumit. You
Sumit.
have done fantastic job beyond
Thank you.
anything.
Really.